This video is going to be shorter than normal because I am only focusing on one main idea: how to quickly and effectively counter a widely held false belief attributed to the German Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels. Ministry of Public Enlightenment? That sounds about as legitimate as President Biden's short-lived Disinformation Governance Board, but I digress. The phrase I hear nearly every time I talk to a group about privacy is, quote, "You have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide." My very first thought about this cliche, especially if it really was originally said by Joseph Goebbels, is, you have nothing to fear unless you're hiding a 13-year-old enemy of the state in your attic. Another variation of this saying is, quote, "If you aren't doing anything wrong, you shouldn't care about who's watching you." These statements are weapons-grade propaganda. They instantly frame any debate about privacy as being between the bad people who are doing something wrong and have something to hide, and the good people who don't care about privacy because they aren't doing anything wrong. I am Dr. John Padfield, an engineer turned state representative turned business professor, and this is Business Reform, where we discuss issues at the intersection of business, technology, and society. Over the years, I've heard numerous people, including many fellow Christians, repeat these lines which reinforce the false idea that the only people who care about privacy are people with something to hide. And it really doesn't matter if we are talking about government surveillance or surveillance capitalism, tracking and monetizing our every movement, purchase, and social interaction. Too many good-intentioned people entirely miss the point. Privacy is not about hiding things, it's about consent. As a free, independent, and responsible adult, I should have the right to decide what I want to share about myself, with whom, how, and when I choose to do so. But many companies today, including General Motors and Facebook, have realized just how much money they can make collecting and selling information about us without our informed consent, and even massive lawsuits and/or fines don't seem to be enough to make them stop. Some companies today have business models that are about as consensual as a date with Bill Cosby. With that said, what is the best way to counter the argument that only people who are doing something wrong or have something to hide need to worry about who's watching them and recording their movements? To far too many people, arguing against that flawed premise can come across as defensive and make them suspicious of what you might be hiding. So I came up with a different approach. I simply asked them if they took their 6-year-old daughter or granddaughter to a public park and noticed a creepy guy with a telephoto camera taking photos of their child, would that bother them? It shouldn't, because neither they nor their daughter or granddaughter is doing anything wrong, and besides, nobody has a reasonable expectation of privacy in a public park. If they don't want some creep taking photos of their child and potentially sharing them with his friends online, they should have kept their child home, inside their house, with the curtains closed. So far, I have not found one single person who is comfortable with the idea of a stranger following their child around with a camera. Most people are also uncomfortable with the idea of a stranger following them around with a camera, even when they, quote, have nothing to hide. In my experience, asking a person if they would be bothered by a stranger taking photos of their child is a game changer. No responsible parent would say yes, they are fine with a grown man they've never met taking photos of their child swinging or going down a slide without even asking the parent's consent to take those pictures. I saw one father's nostrils flare and his pupils constrict in a visceral reaction when I showed him this image. The reality of people like this existing in our society shatters the myth that people with, quote, nothing to hide or who aren't doing anything wrong shouldn't worry about their privacy. Unfortunately, some people like this in our society today carry guns and badges. Just within the past 2 weeks, one officer in Alabama and another in Massachusetts have been arrested for separate, horrendous crimes against children. Other people with guns and badges have used their access to publicly funded surveillance technology to stalk intimate partners and their new boyfriends literally hundreds of times. I am not saying all law enforcement officers are bad, far from it. I have friends who currently work in law enforcement and other friends who used to work in law enforcement. I am simply making the point that just because someone works in law enforcement does not automatically mean they should be granted unrestricted and unsupervised access to modern surveillance technology. In my opinion, no one should have unrestricted and unsupervised access to that technology, including the people who own and operate the companies that sell and install that surveillance technology. How have you countered people who claim you shouldn't be worried about your privacy if you aren't doing anything wrong? I hope you will give my method a try and let me know in the comments how it works for you. What other arguments have you heard both for and against the widespread use of surveillance technology? I can't wait to read your comments.